Hi there, welcome to Neppy Invest. Just a brief update to the A2 Milk story, in particular the share price. It's been hovering around $10 for the last few days, maybe the last few weeks, and it's been really interesting, a fight between the bulls and the bears and who's going to win in the end. I do think the market is half expecting a further downgrade, but I think if the market was completely sold on another downgrade, the share price would be considerably lower than it is now. And perhaps because we have seen a new CEO come on board on the 8th of February, the market might be thinking there is potential that the new CEO might turn things around in the short term, and that would see the share price go forward from here on in. So in this video, what I'm going to do is just look at that news of the new CEO, just talk about him briefly. Then I'll look at the share price, what's been happening with that, because it is quite interesting, particularly for those who like to look at share prices and charts. And then I'll discuss what it all means moving forward for A2 Milk. So just first of all, just the news, and there's been a dearth of news from A2 Milk in the last 3 or 4 weeks since I did my last video. And the only news of substance is the fact that the new CEO, David Bortolussi, hope I haven't botched that pronunciation of that name, he has come on board. So he was appointed on the 11th of August, and it's taken 6 months to finally to see him come into the company. So he does have an interesting past. Now, his interesting past began with Foster's Group. So he was the chief strategic officer of Foster's Group from 2004 to 2009. He made some really interesting decisions with that group that did provide significant shareholder value. So then he became the CEO of Pacific Brands from 2009 to 2016. I do remember that company back then. And then Pacific Brands was bought out by Hain Brands, and then he got a position with Hain Brands as the group president of the international innerwear. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but he does have a good reputation. So even though he's been sort of within the clothing sector for the last 12 or so years, he was part of a drinking group, I suppose you can call that, a liquid drinking group between, well, it's 5 years, between 2004 and 2009. So hopefully he can provide some really good growth for A2 Milk, provide some really good leadership. And I think that's needed right now just because of the last few months have been quite negative. So before I get to some updated charts, just going to go back in time and look at the last time I did a video and look at the charts then, just because I just want to emphasize the fact that $10 has been a significant price level for A2 Milk. It was support back then. It bounced off it a couple of times, and you can see it definitely on the right-hand chart. On the 18th of January, it bounced off it when it was in a long-term down, or not a long-term downtrend, but a sort of a medium-term downtrend, and it bounced off it quite healthily. So $10 has been really healthy support, and $10 as a round number just adds to that fact that it is support. It's just a psychological level. That's all it is. And in fact, when you're talking about the short-term movement of share prices, it's all driven by psychology if there's no news flow from the company. So what I'm going to show you now is just the updated chart to 1 p.m. on the 16th of February. And this all makes sense when I show you the next slide. So I'm looking at the short-term movement in the share price. So I'm focusing on the 15-minute candlesticks. Now, if you look at the 12th of February, you can see the share price, it was hovering around $10 almost all day. And then right around close, or maybe around about an hour before close, we did see more than likely a fund manager come in and just dump his shares on the market, and that broke the support, which is a fairly negative or bearish sort of thing when you see support broken on really high volume. And that's the best way to see support or resistance broken on high volume. It's quite powerful sort of movement. And then what I thought we were going to see, we did see for the next few days, the share price just drifting lower, got to about $9.70 at the start of trading, or the first few hours of trading on the 16th of February. And towards the start of trading on the 16th of February, you'd see quite a bit of selling. So you can see a bit of spikes, high volume there, those red little bars on the volume side of the chart, which was suggesting to me that there was a fund manager moving out of a position, and then on a dime it just switched. Instead of a fund manager selling, we started to see fund managers, maybe just one fund manager, started to take a position or adding to a position. And we did see the share price with those increases in volume. You can see those green bars were actually higher than those red bars. So whoever was buying in was taking a larger position than whoever was selling previously. And that drove the share price up from $9.70 to $9.90. Then the share price went sideways up until 1 p.m. That's actually quite positive. So then I went to take a break. I did my 5,000, or didn't do it. I did some of my 5,000 piece puzzle, which I've been doing since about May of 2020. So I took a little bit of a break and I came back, looked at the close, and I was really surprised to see what happened from 1 p.m. up until close. So this is the updated chart of A2 milk to the close. And we saw that large volume where I've circled there, where I was talking about that fund managers started to buy in. Then we saw a bit of a lull in the volume, and then all of a sudden, as the share price went from $9.90 to $10, we saw a massive flux of share buying coming into the market. And we can see, just as we saw a large volume, saw that support broken on the 12th of February, today we saw a large volume coming in, breaking through the now resistance level of $10. So quite positive movement today on large volume. So you can see how powerful $10 is as a support and resistance, because you need large volume to break through it. And that's the only way you can break through it, because again, it's a psychological barrier to the movement of the share price. I think I cannot really say this enough, that in the short term, psychology plays a massive role in the movement of the share price. If you understand human psychology, you can do quite well with understanding why and how the share price of a company can move in the short term. So what does all this mean for A2 milk? Why am I focusing on the short-term movements of the share price? So I've just included a fairly famous investing saying. It's been attributed to Benjamin Graham, but there is some thought that Warren Buffett did have quite a bit of a say in the wording of this saying. So in the short term, the market is a voting machine, but in the long run, the market is a weighing machine. So what does that mean for the investor? All that is saying is, in the short term, sentiment is the driving force behind the share price movement of a company, which sentiment is really based off human psychology. But when you talk about the long-term future of a company with its share price, it's all about the financials. That's what ultimately drives the share price over the long term. So I think most professionals, most fund managers or financial advisors, they would probably suggest to you as an investor that you should be focusing on the long term, because the short term movements of the share price is just noise, because sentiment can change at a whim. We've seen that with A2 milk recently. They have released no news of significance over the past 3 or 4 weeks, but the share price has been going up and down. When it broke through $10, there's a chance that there were some shorters thinking that was a good time to short A2 milk, because it drove through a good support area at $10 on good volume, and then when it broke back up $10, they probably exited that position, because that was actually a fairly bullish sign for A2 milk. So I am mostly, or have been mostly, a long-term growth investor. So I do focus on the long-term financials of a company, but I have switched recently to look at the short-term movements in the share price, simply because it's quite fascinating to see just how important human psychology is in driving the share price up and down in the short term. And I do believe if you do understand that, then you can actually add value to your long-term positions. So I hope you've enjoyed this video on the update to the A2 milk story. Now, this is still my largest holding in my portfolio. I've been holding A2 milk for quite a few years. My other large holdings in Appen and Altium, I've actually sold out of them recently, and there's other companies now moving up into my largest holding range, including Zip and AVA Risk Group. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I find what's happening with A2 milk really fascinating now. Even though it's down over 50% since its high in June or July, it was $20. I do believe eventually it's going to get back to $20 and more than likely move above $20. I would say I'll give 2 or 3 years if asked a time frame for that. I'm not a professional advisor, so if you do need to seek some financial advice for your circumstances, make sure you seek out someone who is qualified and can speak to your own financial needs. That's all for this video. Hope you've enjoyed it. Have a good day. See ya.